How did Walter Payton become a legend on Bears teams that often weren't good enough to deserve him? The 1985 Bears gave him the Super Bowl ring, but Payton had been proving the point for years before that. Before the championship defense, before the Super Bowl shuffle, before the version of Chicago everyone remembers first, Payton was carrying offenses that often had no business leaning on one man that heavily. In 1977, he rushed for 1,852 yards, won AP MVP, and set a then record with 275 rushing yards in one game against Minnesota, while dealing with a 101-degree fever and intense flu. Later, he broke Jim Brown's career rushing record and retired as the all-time leader. But running back greatness is never simple. Big numbers can live on bad, average, playoff, and championship teams. Payton had all four contexts. So how good was Walter Payton actually? Before Chicago, before the rushing record, before sweetness became one of the safest words in NFL history, Walter Payton came from Columbia, Mississippi, and built his name at Jackson State from 1971 through 1974. And that late start only makes the climb more impressive. Payton did not even play football until his junior year of high school, partly because he did not want to compete directly with his older brother Eddie. He was not built in the middle of the NFL hype machine. He came through a historically black college, earned little All-American recognition twice, and proved he could dominate without the biggest national spotlight. That matters because Payton's whole career became the same argument over and over. Underestimate the stage, underestimate the team, underestimate the setup, and he would still make the football world adjust to him. His case does not start with a perfect NFL runway. It starts with Chicago taking him 4th overall in the 1975 draft, then immediately finding out what kind of player they had. His rookie season was not the fully formed legend yet. In 1975, the Bears went 4-10 and missed the playoffs. Payton finished with 679 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, and 196 carries. Good signs, but not a takeover season. Not the kind of year where you can say the league had already been solved. But the first clue was in the workload. Chicago put real carries on him right away, and by year 2, the question changed fast. In 1976, Payton jumped to 1,390 rushing yards, 13 rushing touchdowns, and 311 carries. The Bears went 7-7 and still missed the playoffs. But now Payton was not just a talented young back. He was becoming the engine of the offense. That is the first major proof point in his career. A second-year player taking on that much work, producing that many yards, and scoring that often is not just flashing. That is a franchise back arriving. And then, 1977 turned the whole thing from promising into historic. Payton rushed for 1,852 yards and 14 touchdowns on 339 carries. He won the AP NFL Most Valuable Player award. The Bears went 9-5 and made the playoffs. That season is the cleanest early answer to what Payton could be at his absolute best. He was not just piling up a nice stat line. He was putting together one of the defining running back seasons of his era. The game everyone remembers came against the Minnesota Vikings on November 20th, 1977. Payton carried the ball 40 times for 275 yards and a touchdown in a 10-7 Bears win. That was a then-record rushing performance, breaking O.J. Simpson's previous mark of 273 yards. And the detail that still sounds unreal is that Payton did it while dealing with a 101-degree fever and intense flu. You do not need to exaggerate that game. The facts already do the work. 40 carries, 275 yards, a 3-point win, 1 touchdown, a record that stood for 23 years. That is the kind of game that separates a great back from a player defenses can know is coming and still fail to stop. And that is where Payton's peak case starts to get scary. Because 1977 was not a random spike. It was the middle of a long run where Chicago kept feeding him and he kept producing. In 1978, he had 1,395 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns, and 333 carries. The Bears went 7-9 and missed the playoffs. In 1979, he went back over 1,600 yards, finishing with 1,610 rushing yards, 14 touchdowns, and 369 carries, while Chicago went 10-6 and made the playoffs. In 1980, he added 1,460 rushing yards on 317 carries. The touchdowns dipped to 6, and the Bears went 7-9, but the workload and yardage were still elite. That stretch gives you the real early Payton picture. He was not a one-year MVP story. From 1976 through 1980, he produced like one of the best backs in football year after year. The team results moved around him: 7-7, 9-5, 7-9, 10-6, 7-9. That matters because it keeps the evaluation honest. Payton's greatness did not automatically turn every Bears season into a playoff season. Football does not work that way. But his individual production was high enough, consistent enough, and heavy enough that his case did not need perfect team success to make sense. The fair counter-argument with any running back is always impact. A back can be great and still depend on game script, blocking, defense, and quarterback play. Payton played a position where even huge numbers do not control the entire sport the way a quarterback can. So the question is not whether he single-handedly controlled wins and losses. He did not. Nobody at that position does. The question is whether his job description was broader than just taking handoffs, and whether his production held up long enough to separate him from the pack. That is where Payton becomes different. He finished his career with 16,726 rushing yards and 110 rushing touchdowns. Those are not just good totals. He broke Jim Brown's career rushing record of 12,312 yards on October 7, 1984, against the New Orleans Saints, and he retired as the all-time rushing leader. That is the central record in his career. For a running back, that is the mountaintop. But Payton was not only a rushing total. He also caught 492 passes for 4,538 yards. That is a massive receiving layer for a running back, and it matters because it shows how often Chicago could keep him involved beyond simple handoffs. He was not just a 1st-and-10 runner. He had value in the passing game too. Then there is the strange little wrinkle that makes his profile even more complete. Payton threw 8 career touchdown passes. That does not make him a quarterback, obviously, but it does tell you how much the Bears trusted him as a football player. Halfback option stuff only works when a defense has to respect the run first, and Payton's threat as a runner made those plays possible. By the end of the 1970s, he had also received attention for his work as a blocker, receiver, emergency punter, and quarterback. That is not just trivia. It supports the eye test version of Payton's case. He was a complete back. If the job was running through contact, he could do it. If the job was catching the ball, he had the resume. If the job was throwing off a trick look, he had 8 touchdown passes. If the job was doing the unglamorous stuff, the packet backs that up too. The 1981 and 1982 seasons make the longevity case more interesting. In 1981, Payton had 1,222 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns, and 339 carries. The Bears went 6-10 and missed the playoffs. In 1982, a shortened season, he had 596 rushing yards, 1 touchdown, and 148 carries, while Chicago went 3-6 and missed the playoffs. Those years are not the shiny part of the story, but they matter because great careers are not made only from peak posters. They are made from what happens after the peak, when the numbers have to keep stacking and the body of work has to survive the middle chapters. Payton's did. In 1983, he rushed for 1,421 yards and 6 touchdowns on 314 carries. Chicago went 8-8 and missed the playoffs. In 1984, he rushed for 1,684 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 381 carries, while the Bears went 10-6 and made the playoffs. That 1984 season is one of the strongest pieces of evidence for his staying power. He was no longer the young back who had exploded in 1977. He was deep into his career, still taking 381 carries, still clearing 1,600 yards, and still climbing the record book. On September 19, 1984, he passed Franco Harris as the active leader in career rushing yards. 3 weeks later, he broke Jim Brown's career rushing record. That is the kind of sequence that turns a great career into a historic one. Passing the active leader is one thing. Passing Jim Brown is different. Brown's name carried a standard. Payton reached it, passed it, and kept going. And then came the season that most fans connect to the ring. In 1985, the Bears went 15-1 and made the playoffs. Payton rushed for 1,551 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 324 carries. Chicago also had the emergence of quarterback Jim McMahon, and the Bears established the league's second-best offense. Their defense became one of the most famous defenses in NFL history. That team was not a one-man show, and it should not be described like one. But Payton's role on that team was still enormous. A back with 324 carries and more than 1,500 yards on a 15-1 team is not decoration. He was a central piece of one of the most famous teams the league has ever had. The Bears won Super Bowl 20, giving Payton the one Super Bowl ring on his resume. That ring matters, but it is not the whole case. With some players, the championship is the thing that rescues the argument. With Payton, the championship adds a team achievement to a resume that was already Hall of Fame level. He had the MVP season. He had the record game. He had the career rushing record. He had the receiving value. He had the workload. The Super Bowl gave the career the last major team accomplishment it needed. And because the 1985 Bears were so famous, there was a temptation to let that team swallow the player. That would be a mistake. Payton was already Walter Payton before the Super Bowl shuffle, before the 15-1 season, before the ring. The 1985 season did not create his greatness. It put it on the sport's biggest stage. Then 1986 gave one more important piece. The Bears went 14-2 and made the playoffs, and Payton still rushed for 1,333 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 321 carries. That is not a farewell tour. That is another heavy-use, high-production season after the championship year. And it matters because it keeps the timeline from becoming too neat. Payton did not peak in 1977, wait around for 1985, and then fade. He kept producing across eras of his own career. By 1987, the end was closer. He rushed for 533 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 146 carries. The Bears went 11-4 and made the playoffs. He retired at the end of that season. Even with the late career decline, the full career line is still massive. 16,726 rushing yards, 110 rushing touchdowns, 492 catches, 4,538 receiving yards, and 8 passing touchdowns. The awards back it up cleanly. 9 Pro Bowls, 5 first-team All-Pro selections, the 1977 AP MVP, Hall of Fame induction in 1993, and the Super Bowl ring from the 1985 Bears. That is a complete resume. Peak, volume, versatility, team success, and legacy. The hardest part with Payton is deciding where he sits in the running back conversation, because different backs have different cases. Some have a cleaner, short peak. Some have more modern receiving usage. Some have highlight reels built around pure speed or power. Payton's case is more balanced than that. He has the huge rushing total, but he also has the signature game. He has the MVP season, but he also has the decade-long accumulation. He has the all-around skill, but he also has the championship. And the numbers show how long the pressure stayed on him. From 1976 through 1986, excluding only the shortened 1982 season, Payton rushed for at least 1,200 yards every year in the locked season table. That is an absurd run of production. It is not just that he was great. It is that Chicago kept giving him full workloads, and he kept turning those carries into real offense. Even his team context makes the case more grounded. The Bears missed the playoffs in 1975 and 1976, then made it in 1977. They missed in 1978, made it in 1979, then missed from 1980 through 1983. Then from 1984 through 1987, they made the playoffs every season in the table. That arc helps frame Payton properly. He had elite individual seasons before the Bears became a consistent playoff team, and he still had major production once the team results improved. That is important because it answers two different versions of the question. If someone says Payton was just a great player on a famous 1985 team, the timeline says no. His MVP season was in 1977. His 275-yard game was in 1977. His 1,610-yard season was in 1979. His career rushing record came in 1984. The Super Bowl came after years of proof were already on the board. If someone says his numbers were just empty production, the later team context says no. He was still a major part of the 1984 playoff team, the 1985 champion, the 1986 playoff team, and the 1987 playoff team. He was not just stacking yards in seasons that went nowhere. His production existed on losing teams, average teams, playoff teams, and a champion. That range is why the Payton case holds up. His 1977 peak showed he could be the best player in the league. His 1984 record chase showed he could outlast history's standard. His receiving numbers showed he was more than a handoff machine. His passing touchdowns showed the Bears could build wrinkles around his threat. His 1985 season showed he could be a major offensive piece on a legendary champion. And the 275-yard game gives the whole thing a memory. Not just a spreadsheet, not just a plaque. A real game you can point to and say, that is what it looked like when Walter Payton was at his most dangerous. So how good was Walter Payton actually? He was one of the greatest running backs who ever played football. Not because of one record, not because of one Super Bowl, not because nostalgia says so, because the full file is too strong in too many directions. He had the peak season, the career record, the heavy workload, the receiving production, the trick play value, the awards, the ring, and the Hall of Fame finish. The fairest verdict is this: Walter Payton was not just a legend of the 1985 Bears. He was already an all-time back before that team became iconic. And the championship only completed a case that his production had been building for more than a decade. And if you want the real viewer question, it is this: when you rank the greatest running backs ever, how much do you value the one who gave you almost everything at once? If you enjoyed this breakdown, stick with Touchdown Time Warp and check out another one right here.